Between Dhaka's congested intersections where dust hangs between faces and honking cars, millions of people still cross every day at the speed of a race without a finish line. Under rusty corrugated iron roofs, lives rush in the spaces left by the garbage sewage and old walls of the overcrowded city. Bangladesh is no stranger to pollution or population density, but what few people see is how a society operates amid such suffocation where inconvenience has become routine. And here, crises are daily. Number 1. Density migration and urbanization. Bangladesh covers less than 150,000 square kilometers. This makes it the most densely populated country on the planet, with an average of more than 1,300 people per square kilometer. But the averages don't reflect the real pressures. The capital, Dhaka, is now several times more crowded than the average, with inner-city areas such as Mirpur Kamrangarchar and Mohammadpur recording densities exceeding 150,000 people per square kilometer, the equivalent of more than 20 people living in a space the size of a tennis court. The pace of urbanization here is not only rapid, but also chaotic. Every day, some 2,000 people from rural areas move into Dhaka in search of a chance to survive, not just jobs, but shelter from the natural disasters and rising sea levels that are ravaging the Ganges Delta. Many former farmers have been pushed off their land by saline intrusion eroding coastlines or crop failures caused by unpredictable floods. They leave their villages as pushers, not pullers. But when they reach the city, they are pushed further into a space that is already too small for them. Slums have sprung up as a response to the city's desperate need for housing. Korail, Dhaka's largest slum, is home to more than 120,000 people, crammed into rows of wooden corrugated iron houses with sagging floors and open drains. Personal space is virtually eliminated here. A family of 6 can live in about 10 square meters, no partitions, no private toilets, no windows. Public infrastructure has not kept pace with population growth. Traffic in Dhaka is often paralyzed. The average speed during rush hour is only about 4 km/h slower than a pedestrian. Roads are clogged with trucks, three-wheelers, old buses, and hundreds of thousands of motorbikes jostling for space. The drainage system has nearly collapsed every rainy season, causing chronic flooding in low-lying areas, with sewage mixing with rainwater rushing straight into people's homes. Dhaka's urban authorities are responsible for more than 10 million registered residents, in addition to millions more living off the grid. But planning tools have not kept pace. Many settlements have developed spontaneously without any formal cadastral maps or formal water or electricity connections. A recent World Bank report found that 55% of Bangladesh's urban population now lives in informal settlements. This situation creates a paradox. The city continues to expand, but the quality of life declines. The poor are pushed to the edges of space, but the city's need for labor makes it impossible to remove them from the system. Affordable housing is virtually non-existent, and the informal rental market without contracts or protections becomes the main form of housing. The population distribution in Bangladesh is skewed towards the urban areas. Dhaka, Chattogram, and Khulna continue to expand at a rapid pace, while many rural areas in the north and west still have available land and labor. With no strategy to direct the flow of people and no infrastructure to retain them, all opportunities are concentrated in the same place, and there they remain. Dhaka is operating like a giant funnel, sucking in people, sucking in resources, and sucking in the biggest problems of a developing country. But at the bottom of that funnel, there are no filters to regulate. What you are seeing is no longer the usual overcrowding. It is a society compressed to the limit, where the pressure is no longer a lack of things, but a situation where everything is too fast, too much, and there is no way out. Number 2. Pollution and environmental crisis. In Dhaka, the first thing a newcomer notices is not the scenery, but the air. A fine layer of dust covers most of the roads, clinging to people's faces, food, and even sunlight. The average air quality index AQI here regularly exceeds 200, with many days reaching hazardous levels, the level at which health experts warn against breathing outdoors for extended periods of time. Air pollution comes from three main sources: old vehicles as unregulated brick kilns, and industries scattered around the city. More than 200 factories operate around Dhaka, burning coal, diesel, and cheap chemicals, pumping untreated smoke into the atmosphere. Areas like Hazaribagh, once considered black spots, now extend to neighboring districts like Tejgaon and Gulshan, which were once relatively clean commercial hubs. In such conditions, every breath carries PM2.5 ultrafine particles, which the World Health Organization has identified as a carcinogen and a cause of many chronic respiratory diseases. Since 2023, the number of asthma, bronchitis, and lung cancer cases in Dhaka's public hospitals has increased by more than 20%, especially among children and outdoor workers. Air pollution is only part of the picture. Bangladesh's rivers are also carrying a deadly toll. The Buriganga River, once the commercial lifeline of the capital, is now a thick, black, frothy river. In many samples, dissolved oxygen levels were near zero, meaning no aquatic life could survive. The main culprit is untreated industrial effluent from tanneries, textile dyeing plants, and processing plants. The textile industry alone, which accounts for nearly 85% of the country's exports, dumps millions of liters of wastewater containing dyes, acids, and heavy metals into the waterways around Dhaka and Ghazipur every day. Despite government mandates for the construction of centralized wastewater treatment plants, most factories either avoid the task or discharge their waste outside normal business hours. 12 wastewater treatment plants promised for 2023-2025 have yet to be operational, partly due to a lack of funding and partly due to a lack of effective monitoring mechanisms. The waste situation is also dire. Dhaka produces about 3,500 tons of garbage every day, but only half is collected and sent to landfills. The rest is dumped on the streets in canals or set on fire in the open. Open burning of garbage, common in poor neighborhoods, contributes to the increase in carbon dioxide and dioxins in the air. Industrial waste, especially from textile factories, is more complicated. Rags of fabric, packaging, chemicals, and dyes are all toxic, but much of it is not sorted. In slums like Korail or Kamrangarchar, drinking water is often contaminated with arsenic or diarrhea-causing bacteria due to the lack of clean water and wastewater treatment systems. Residents share open water tanks, makeshift pipes, and unsterilized public toilets. Every rainy season, sewage overflows onto the streets and into homes, causing outbreaks of skin diseases, cholera, and dengue fever. This situation led to more than 1,000 deaths during the summer of 2023, mostly among young children. The Bangladesh government has announced a Clean Air and Sustainable Environment Case Plan to improve air quality, promote the use of compressed natural gas, CNG, and control emission standards. However, these policies have not produced real results, largely due to lack of monitoring and corruption in implementation. An internal report by the Ministry of Environment in early 2025 showed that only 17% of factories in the outskirts of Dhaka had completed full environmental reporting as required. Institutions like the World Bank and the IFC have invested heavily in green transformation, especially in the textile industry, which is considered a pollution hotspot. Some factories have begun to make changes, recycling water-saving energy, switching to cleaner technology. But the improvements remain experimental. The rest of the system continues to operate on old inertia, and as a result, pollution continues to spread. in poor neighborhoods where people live near factories, landfills, and drainage canals. Environmental education programs are virtually non-existent. Garbage is not sorted. Few people know what they are exposed to on a daily basis, only that they should avoid windy times because the smell from the factories permeates every alley. People here no longer try to avoid pollution. They try to get through it with the least impact. The routes they take, the times they go out, even when they open their doors, all are adjusted according to the levels of dust, smoke, and smell. These calculations are repeated every day, no longer a personal reflex, but part of the way the whole community lives. Number 3. Textiles, GDP, and the price to pay. Bangladesh is now the world's second largest exporter of textiles and garments after China. Over the past 2 decades, the industry has become an economic mainstay, contributing about 84% of the country's exports, or nearly $45 billion by 2024. About 4 million workers, mostly women from rural areas, work in more than 4,000 textile factories spread across industrial zones in Dhaka, Ghazipur, Narayanganj, and Chattogram. But it is precisely that achievement that most clearly reveals Bangladesh's development, paradox, and industry that helps lift the economy, but at the same time puts serious pressure on the environment and human resources. Every day, textile dyeing and laundry factories discharge millions of liters of water containing bleach dyes, sulfuric acid, and heavy metals such as lead, cadmium, and mercury. Most of the wastewater is untreated before being discharged directly into rivers such as Turag Dhaleshwari and Buriganga. As a result, the aquatic ecosystem in these areas has been virtually wiped out. Nearby agricultural land has been contaminated, and communities living around the rivers are exposed to polluted water from their daily wells. In addition, the textile industry generates a huge amount of solid waste fabric scraps, dyed packaging, and chemical powders in bags, much of which is unsorted and often burned outdoors or dumped in uncontrolled landfills. The manufacturing process also emits greenhouse gases, chemical dust, and solvent vapors, especially in small factories located deep in residential areas where there are no exhaust systems or mandatory safety procedures. That's the environmental cost. In human terms, the costs are even higher. Of the millions of workers, nearly 70% are women between the ages of 18 and 35. Many of whom have never completed secondary school. They work repetitive assembly lines, working 10 to 14 hours a day, 6 days a week in conditions without air conditioning, no windows, and often with only 30-minute breaks. NGO reports indicate fainting, work-related accidents, and even deaths still occur in small factories where there is little or no regular inspection. The 2013 collapse of the Rana Plaza building, which killed more than 100 workers, was a global wake-up call. More than a decade later, many large factories have improved working conditions, but much of the supply chain still relies on small-scale subcontractors where compliance is virtually non-existent. A large proportion of Bangladesh's output is sourced from fast fashion brands in Europe and North America. To keep costs low, brands often pressure factories on prices and schedules, forcing them to cut costs on safety, waste disposal, and wages. Some companies claim to be pursuing sustainable manufacturing, but supply chain verification is limited. Green labels often apply only to Tier 1 factories, while the real impact occurs deeper down the chain, where it is largely invisible on the business map. The Bangladesh government is aware of the strategic role of the textile industry and is trying to balance economic interests with the need for sustainable development. Some new industrial zones, such as Bhaluka or Adamji, have adopted higher environmental standards with centralized wastewater treatment plants and emission controls. However, the majority of small businesses remain beyond the reach of monitoring mechanisms, mainly due to a lack of inspectors and insufficient penalties. International financial institutions such as the IFC and the World Bank have funded programs such as the Partnership for Cleaner Textile Pact, providing technical assistance and loans to factories to improve water circulation systems and reduce energy consumption. Some leading enterprises have applied waterless dyeing technology, fiber recycling, and waste-to-energy generation, but overall, they still account for a very small proportion. From a social perspective, the textile industry also raises questions about the sustainability of growth dependent on cheap labor. With automation increasing in developed countries, the traditional model of manual production like that in Bangladesh may no longer be advantageous in the long term. Meanwhile, the quality of vocational training and skill transfer among the working class remains very limited. You may see the Made in Bangladesh label on many global products. But behind every shirt or pair of pants is a chain of operations where most workers are at the bottom. Here, growth does not create opportunity by itself. It requires reorganization to serve more, not exploit more. Number 4. Corruption and the government system. While Bangladesh has consistently achieved a GDP growth rate of 6% to 7% per year, its urban administrative apparatus still operates in a fragmented and disorganized structure. Rapid urbanization in cities such as Dhaka, Chattogram, Khulna has left local governments in a state of constant reaction to events reacting rather than planning. Bangladesh currently has no single Ministry of Urban Affairs. The responsibilities of planning infrastructure, water, housing, and transport are divided among a number of agencies from the Ministry of Urban Development, the Ministry of Environment, the Ministry of Industry, to municipal agencies. Because of fragmented responsibilities and a lack of effective coordination, development projects often conflict or overlap. The approach road has sunk before a bridge is completed. The power to a resettlement area that is unoccupied is cut off because it is outside the range of the existing grid. In Dhaka, the current urban plan is more than 10 years out of date, but it remains the main legal document for granting building permits. As a result, the city is developing on a patch-the-leaks model. Wherever there is space, high-rises are built regardless of whether the drainage or electricity systems are adequate. New residential areas are next to landfills. Schools are surrounded by machinery factories. Digging deeper into the system, corruption is a core bottleneck. Transparency International's 2024 report found that 70.9% of households in Bangladesh had to pay extra to access public services, from healthcare and education to land processing. These off-the-books payments are so common that they have become part of the actual administrative process. In the civil service, appointments and promotions are largely based on political connections rather than professional competence. In 2023, the government issued a new directive requiring citizens to seek approval from their superiors before suing a public official, directly undermining transparency and eliminating one of the few remaining oversight mechanisms. For large-scale projects such as highways, flood control dams, or resettlement areas, actual costs often exceed the original plan by several times without clear explanations. Contracts are broken down. The bidding process is formalized and then allocated according to interest groups. This situation causes many projects, despite their strategic significance, to become a burden on the budget and even cause environmental damage if not constructed properly. Local governments lack budgets and autonomy. Although they are directly responsible for managing pressing issues such as traffic, waste, and drainage, they retain only about 15% of the tax budget, with the rest controlled by the central government. This leaves mayors and city councils with few tools to proactively address problems. Even when they want to introduce new policies, they need approval from at least 3 ministerial agencies. In 2025, some domestic scholars and international organizations proposed the establishment of a Ministry of Cities, an interministerial agency with the authority to directly coordinate urban planning, budgeting, and environmental monitoring. This idea received support from experts, but there has been no sign of implementation due to political entanglement and power competition among existing ministries. But the pressure from citizens in major cities is no longer muted. In late 2024, protests over the cost of living, the quality of public services, and corruption erupted in Dhaka and Chattogram, forcing officials to respond at the executive level. The change in government leadership is not just a transfer of power, but also a reflection of a level of discontent that has exceeded normal tolerance. Meanwhile, civil society organizations are becoming more proactive. They are deploying tools to monitor community budgets, organizing training on administrative procedures, and supporting citizens in exercising their right to access public information. No longer just protesting, some urban residents are actively testing, tracing, and exposing public decisions. You're looking at a society where tolerance used to be the default. Now, as tolerance is replaced by concrete action, the ripple effect has begun to take shape, not loudly, but enough to derail a system that used to be silent. Number 5. Young generation and social movements. While the bureaucracy is still struggling with projects, many change initiatives have started from outside the system. More precisely, from the powerless but motivated youth. They do not enter politics through official channels, but choose to intervene from the ground, where the impact can be seen and measured by action. One of the most prominent groups is the Bangladesh Youth Environmental Initiative, BYEI. An organization started by students at the University of Dhaka in 2016 and has expanded its activities to more than 12 major cities. They focus on environmental education, organizing workshops, seminars, and cleanup campaigns in black water canals, polluted rivers, and urban landfills. These campaigns are not short-term movements, but are maintained quarterly, with effectiveness evaluated and processes developed. In 2024, the BYEI team worked with high school students in Narayanganj to install coarse filters using bamboo mesh and recycled plastic at major drains. After 3 months, the flow of plastic waste into the river had dropped by nearly 30% in the pilot area, not significant on a national scale, but clear evidence that targeted action can still produce results. Sadia Islam, who was introduced earlier, is one of the most prominent representatives of grassroots activism. In addition to coordinating social media campaigns against the Buriganga River pollution, she also acts as a bridge between community groups and international NGOs. Sadia does not pursue grand theoretical frameworks, but focuses on the ability to mobilize resources and people to solve specific problems. For her, the public shaming of a factory for secret discharges is more effective than an academic paper. At the same time, advocacy groups for financial transparency and governance reform have also begun to shift from confrontation to verification. Initiatives like Budget Tracker, a community app developed by engineering students, allow citizens to track the disbursement and spending of local government projects. As of early 2025, there had been more than 38,000 visits and reports from users regarding delays, design errors, or lack of public information boards at construction sites. The youth group's success is largely due to their ability to leverage social media to disseminate information. In an environment where state media remains controlled, platforms like Facebook, YouTube, and especially the homegrown app Cholona, a social network developed by Bangladeshi programmers, have become a place to spread education campaigns and monitor communities. Not all initiatives have been frictionless. Several BYEI members have been detained by police for filming dumping from industrial zones without media registration, but most such incidents are quickly publicized online, prompting a response from the government. In 2025, the first Bangladesh Earth Summit was held, bringing together more than 300 groups from across major cities, from communities living near polluted industrial zones to environmental technology startups and independent research groups. The theme, Youth for Climate Integrity, was not just a slogan but was materialized into a series of actions discussing policies sharing low-cost water filtration models and presenting air quality monitoring results collected by residents themselves. Between the exhibition spaces, you'll find groups of engineering students carrying homemade fine dust sensors set up next to booths, offering legal advice on access to information. The way these groups work together is not based on fixed organizations, but on specific issues: polluted rivers, uncollected trash, hidden data. The distinct feeling of being there is not the atmosphere of an event, but of an ecosystem operating on the margins of the official system, where insiders are trying to fix the problems that operate right where they live. They are not there to express their views, but to connect tools and situations. And that connection is not something that someone invited them to create, but something they themselves actively build from reality. Number 6. Reform and a sustainable future. With many cities under pressure from population pollution and inequality, the Bangladeshi government has been forced to rethink its development direction. Reform programs began to be mentioned more frequently from late 2023, when the socio-political crisis led to large-scale protests creating pressure for change in the leadership. The first focus is the environment. The Bangladesh Delta Plan. 2100 was launched with the hope of creating a long-term development framework to cope with climate change, especially sea level rise, urban flooding, and agricultural land erosion. The plan is not only about disaster prevention, but also explicitly mentions urban spatial restructuring, improving drainage capacity, replanning of peri-urban areas, and controlling groundwater exploitation. But the Delta Plan is only part of a larger picture. In the industrial sector, especially textiles, the government has begun requiring new factories to meet emission standards and have wastewater treatment systems before they can be licensed. Repeat violators will not have their licenses renewed. While the regulations are fraught with loopholes, they are a first step toward resetting the rules of the game after years of laxity. A notable new feature is the emergence of green financing mechanisms. From 2024, Bangladesh will start applying an emission tax on old vehicles and tax incentives for businesses investing in solar energy and recycling textile materials. Paluca Industrial Zone has piloted a recirculating water treatment system, reusing up to 80% of the water used in industrial dyeing and washing. This model is being replicated in 2 other industrial zones in Chattogram and Narayanganj. Institutional reforms are also underway. A proposal to establish a Ministry of Cities is currently being considered by Parliament, with the aim of unifying all functions related to urban planning, infrastructure development, and public service oversight. If approved, it would be the first time Bangladesh has a single urban agency rather than the current fragmentation among ministries. Another factor that has helped to strengthen the reform momentum is the commitment of international financial resources with conditions attached. The IMF's $1.3 billion support package for 2025 requires Bangladesh to improve public financial transparency report on environmental progress and expand citizens' access to information. In addition, the World Bank has launched a smart city program in 2 major cities to upgrade urban databases, digitize construction, permitting, and land management. The reforms have yet to produce tangible results, but a different movement has begun to spread across the city. Budget information boards are erected at public buildings, bidding processes are made public, and dialogue between government and the community is no longer a formality. For people accustomed to silence and waiting, such changes at the technical level are enough to create the feeling that the machine, however old, is trying to turn in a different direction. In Dhaka, a group of residents discovered that a drainage project near their neighborhood had changed contractors 3 times in 6 months. This time, they looked up the information through the open budget portal, printed it out, brought it to a town hall meeting, and asked questions directly to city officials. The gesture may be small, but it is no longer rare. As these steps are repeated in multiple places, you will see that the shift is not in the statement or the text. It is in the ability to participate. Not everyone has time to read the budget report, but when someone stands up to look it up and share it with the community, the pressure for transparency changes the level of response. Bangladesh used to be a picture of chaos and overcrowding, from cramped homes to black rivers, from dusty factories to dead-end roads. But now, at those very choke points, someone is choosing to pave the way with process, with data, and by not standing still. Number 7. Preserving the capacity to survive. Bangladesh is a classic example of what happens when growth gets out of hand. A country of nearly 180 million people with infrastructure stretched to its limits, where unskilled workers keep the economy running but live in cramped, squalid conditions and must make do. From a distance, it looks like a society stretched on all fronts: population, environment, health, public services. But even in those bottlenecks, people are starting to make changes, not with grand plans, but with concrete on-the-spot solutions: water purification, recycling, budget oversight. Not every big event makes an impact, but many small, well-placed actions have lasting impact. In a place where life depends on adapting every day, what's remarkable is not the scale of the work, but how people find the space to proactively fix what the system leaves open. You have just followed a journey that was not designed to be beautiful. It was not smooth, not clean, and certainly not predictable. But it is precisely this roughness that shows that Bangladesh is surviving in its own way, persistently, step by step. If what you see here makes you think more about where you live, or makes you look at a familiar issue from a different perspective, leave a like, share this video, and subscribe so you don't miss future episodes from NVL Travel Documentary. We'll continue to travel to places that aren't on the popular tourist itinerary, but always contain the most authentic slices of how people live, cope, and find ways to transcend seemingly immutable limits.